Hey, so this is chapter 11 of Anastasia again, almost finished with the book. So in chapter 10, Anastasia goes over to Mrs. Stein's house and tells her hair looks terrible and she needs to make an effort and go out and make some friends. So Anastasia afterwards goes to the kind of like a house full of old people, and there she tries to get people to agree to come over to her house, and then she's going to invite Mrs. Stein, and then Mrs. Stein can meet some new people and maybe have some friends, because she's obviously worried that Mrs. Stein is going to stay inside and not be very active and be all alone most of the time. Because obviously she has her fish, but she doesn't have much else other than Anastasia and her brother Sam. Chapter 11. No, absolutely not. I won't under any circumstances. Anastasia's mother stood in her studio with a paintbrush behind one ear and her hands planted firmly, oil on her hips. Anastasia glowered. Why not? Because it's a lie. I won't tell anyone a lie on your behalf. And on top of that, it's the stupidest lie I have ever heard. Anastasia was astonished, shocked. She had thought it was a terrific idea. What's so stupid? Look, all you have to do is call Jenny and sound very sad, and tell her that she and Robert shouldn't come on Saturday because you just found out that I have leprosy, and I've had to go to a leper colony very suddenly. Remember, on Saturday is when she's meeting the old people, but she also told her friends to come over. Leprosy is a disease that gets to your skin, and other people can catch it. That's ridiculous. Maybe it's not so ridiculous. Maybe I really do have leprosy. As a matter of fact, my earlobes itch. They've been itching all afternoon. It's an early symptom. It's a symptom that you haven't washed your ears. With all that hair washing you've been doing lately, you would think that you'd remember to wash your ears. Mom, that's gross. Not as gross as lying to your friends. Why do you want them to come anyway? Why don't you want them to come anyway? Anastasia groaned and flopped down in an old stuffed chair covered with painty rags. Oh, it's complicated. I invited some other people over Saturday, some new people I just met. Her mother looked at her, smiled, took the paintbrush from behind her ear and set it up on the table. She sat down on the arm of the chair, the side of the chair, and stroked Anastasia's head. Oh, sweetie, I'm so glad. Dad and I haven't wanted to say anything, but we've been worried about your making friends. Except for Steve, you haven't really met any other kids yet. That's wonderful that now you have, and I'm delighted that you've invited them over. Good grief, Anastasia felt, suddenly, the way that she had when Robert Giannani told her about his retarded cousin, as if suddenly, before you knew it, it was too late to explain. No kidding, Anastasia, I'm really thrilled. And Robert and Jenny will fit right in, I'm sure. Listen, we can have a cookout or something. How many people are coming over? 14? Goodness, that's a lot for a cookout. But I guess we could manage hot dogs, and I could make a big potato salad. Mom, really, just Kool-Aid will be fine. I told them it would just be for Kool-Aid. Well, whatever you think. But you know, we've been talking about getting a badminton set. We could get it before Saturday, and then... Anastasia pictured the senior citizens, the old people, playing badminton. She pictured the ambulance pulling up to cart away the ones with broken hips and heart attacks. She groaned. Mom, you know what I'd really like the best? I'd really like it best if you and Dad would go off to a movie or something Saturday afternoon. Her mother stopped stroking her hair. Anastasia could tell that her feelings were hurt. You mean that you don't want Dad and me to be here and meet your new friends? All of a sudden, you're embarrassed to have us old people around? Oh, Mom, she groaned. It's not that. It's... Oh, for Pete's sake, I need to think. Anastasia pulled herself up out of the chair and started going up to her room. In the hall, Sam was flicking a flashlight on and off. He'd been playing with it all day. Flash, said Sam, shining the light at her and laughing. Knock it off, Sam, Anastasia muttered. Sam's lower lip began to quiver, began to shake, as he decided whether or not to cry. Anastasia walked past him and headed up to the stairs to her room. Her earlobes really did itch. She began to wish that she really did have leprosy. Goodbye, cruel world. Life was just too confusing. Flash! Flash! called Sam after her, blinking his light. Anastasia slammed her door and decided to stay in her tower for a long time, maybe like the rest of her life. But the phone rang. Whenever you decided to lock yourself in a tower for the rest of your life, for Pete's sake, the phone always rings. Anastasia's mother called from the first floor. "Anastasia! What? Is it? Is it for me? Come down here a minute, would you? I want to talk to you." Anastasia clumped down the stairs. On the second floor, Sam swooped out of his bedroom, yelled, "Flash!" and blinked his light at her. "Knock it off, Sam!" Sam grinned and scooted and moved off into a closet. She could see his flashlight blinking beneath the closed closet door. "What do you want? Was the phone for me?" she asked her mother. Not really, but it was puzzling. It was someone named Fran McCormick? Then it was for me. "Well, she said she didn't need to speak to you. She just wanted to check with me to make sure it was all right with me that all these people were coming over on Saturday. I must say that was very nice and considerate of her. I can't remember that any of your other friends ever thought to ask my permission for anything." "What did you tell her?" "I told her short, but I told her we were planning to make a big patch of Kool-Aid. But, Anastasia..." "What?" "Then she said that if it wasn't too much trouble, could we please use artificially sweetened Kool-Aid? Because Edna and Morris and Ernest have diabetes." "That seems strange, Anastasia. I remember there was a child in your third grade class who was diabetic. But for 3 kids out of a batch of 14 to have diabetes? Well, that seems very peculiar and strange to me. Where did you meet these kids?" Anastasia was tempted to burst out laughing and tell her mother that the kids were all senior citizens, old, and that Edna and Morris and Ernest were all in their 70s and 80s years old. But she was mad at her mother. She was mad at her for worrying about her ability to make friends, for Pete's sake. "They have a kind of club," said Anastasia airily. "I was walking past where their clubhouse is, and I just decided to stop in. They were all there playing cards. So we got to talking, and I invited them over. I have a knack for making friends, you know," she added meaningfully. "What do you mean, a kind of club? What do you mean? They were in there playing cards? Were they playing poker or something? Have you gotten yourself involved with some sort of gang, Anastasia Krupnik?" Anastasia looked angrily at her mother. "I suppose you could call it that. You could call it a gang if you want to. I myself don't like to make that kind of stereotyped statement." "Anastasia Krupnik, if those 14 people arrive here Saturday on motorcycles..." Now Anastasia did laugh, almost did laugh, but she was still mad at her mother. She looked down her nose, which was not too hard to do because of her height. "I don't believe any of them will arrive by motorcycle," she said heartedly, and turned to go back upstairs. Sam ambushed her on the landing. "Flash!" "Mom!" Anastasia yelled. "Why is Sam blinding everybody with that blasted flashlight?" "Sam, put your light away for now," said her mother. "He and Mrs. Stein have a plan," she explained to Anastasia. "They're going to flash lights at each other from their bedrooms after dark. Don't ask me why." "Ask me why," grinned Sam. "Why, dummy?" "Because we're playing Flasher. Gertrude used to play Flasher when she was a little girl, and she had a friend who lived right in this house." "Yeah, I know about her friend, Edward Evans, some friend. He grew up and married somebody else, and now all she has is a goldfish." Sam wasn't listening. He had unscrewed and taken the end off his flashlight, and was examining the batteries. "Anyway, dummy, you know what a real flasher is?" "What?" "Some jerk of a man who goes out wearing no clothes but a raincoat, and then he jumps out unexpectedly and opens up his raincoat at people." "Oh," said Sam, with interest. "Does he say flash?" "How should I know? I never saw one." "Well, I say flash," said Sam, losing interest. "I'm a flasher with a flashlight. Flash!" He shone the light in Anastasia's eyes again and ran off when she made a half-hearted attempt to grab him. Anastasia let him go and plodded back up to her bedroom to peel more wallpaper. telephone rang again. This time it was for Anastasia. Her mother called her downstairs. She could tell from her mother's voice that she was still mad. Well, that was okay. Anastasia was still mad too. Is it the motorcycle gang? Did they ask for the gun? Anastasia asked her mother sarcastically. It's Steve Harvey, said her mother coldly. I should have told him you were out stealing hubcaps. Ha ha, very funny. Anastasia took the phone and disappeared into a closet with it. Hi, Steve. Hi, listen, my mom had an idea. She's been wanting to welcome your family to the neighborhood. So she thought maybe your family and mine could get together for a picnic on Saturday. Maybe to Sturbridge or someplace. Oh, rats! Oh, rats! Anastasia had been dying to meet Steve's family. His father was a sportscaster who actually knew a lot of famous athletes personally. His mother was a lawyer with the district attorney's office, and she had prosecuted an ex-murderer once. And his older sister, who was home for a visit, was almost 6 feet tall, Steve said. She was a ballet dancer in New York. Her real name was Anne, but she went by the name Anya professionally. Anastasia thought that was the most terrific, wonderful thing she had ever heard. Anastasia had once wanted to be a ballet dancer herself. She had taken lessons when she was 9 and 10, but her feet never seemed to work right. One day she had tried to show her mother the dance she was practicing for a recital. She had twirled around on one toe, and her other leg knocked over a floor lamp, which hit the TV and bent the antenna. The antenna knocked a picture off the wall, and the picture hit a coffee cup, which turned and spilled over on a book called Treasures of Louvre. Anastasia grabbed for the book, but she tripped on a wrinkle in the rug and fell against the coffee table, breaking one of the table's legs and spraining and hurting her own leg ankle. She had to have x-rays and to wear an ace bandage for 3 weeks, and she had missed the dance recital and quit taking ballet lessons. Her father had said at the time that she should be in the Guinness Book of World Records because she had done $300 worth of damage in 27 seconds. But she had checked in the Guinness Book of World Records and found that a tornado in Hastings, Nebraska in America had beaten that record in 1947. Still, she was dying to meet Anne Harvey. She was dying to meet a female who was almost 6 feet tall and hadn't become a professional basketball player. But instead, on Saturday, instead of going to Sturbridge with the remarkable Harvey family, Anastasia was going to be serving Kool-Aid to 14 senior citizens, and to creepy Robert Giannani, and to traitor Jenny Macaulay, who had gone to see Casablanca without her. She felt like having a tantrum, the way Sam did sometimes, kicking the floor and screaming and shrieking and crying. But 12 was too old for that, and anyway, she didn't want Steve Harvey to hear her kicking the floor and shrieking. Steve had already said once that she seemed very sophisticated and formal for 12 years old. She had explained when he said that probably it was because she grew up in Cambridge, which was a more sophisticated place than the suburbs. Steve had agreed, but then he said something surprising. He had said that before he met Anastasia. He had thought everyone who lived in Cambridge was weird. He had thought that they were all intellectuals, intelligent people who sat around in the evening drinking rosehip tea and playing instruments and recorders. Anastasia had confessed that before she met him, she thought that everyone who lived in the suburbs was boring and preppy, boopy, that they all wore shirts with alligators and went to Bermuda for spring vacation. Steve said that he'd never been to Bermuda in his life, and that he always ripped the alligators off his shirts, the Lacoste shirts. Anastasia said that she hated rosehip tea more than anything in the world except for liver. It had been kind of nice to find out that they were wrong about each other, that they had, it now occurred to her, she realized she had made premature assumptions. So she certainly wasn't going to screech and kick the floor now, even though she sure felt like it. Instead, she said, I'm really sorry, Steve, but we won't be able to on Saturday. I have a couple of friends from Cambridge coming out to visit that day, and there are some other people stopping by too. Well, maybe some other time, Steve said cheerfully. Sure, thought Anastasia glumly. She happened to know that his sister was going back to New York on Sunday to start rehearsals for a new ballet. Probably with Nureyev, for Pete's sake. Very famous person. My life is ruined, and it's all your fault, she muttered to her mother, who was in her studio again, painting different shades of blue onto a large canvas. She had a blue dab on her chin. What's my fault? Why my fault? Called her mother after her as she headed back up the stairs. Anastasia didn't really have an answer for that. Since Steve Harvey couldn't hear her, she gave a very unsophisticated answer. Because I didn't ask to be born, she bellowed and yelled. And her mother had a very unsophisticated answer to that. Nya, nya, she called and stuck out her tongue. Who was the young man with the mysteriously blinking light? Wrote Anastasia at the beginning of chapter 4. And what role was the cruel, subversive woman with blue paint on her chin going to paint in all of this? She went on. It didn't seem fair to leave out her father. So she continued chapter 4 by writing, The tall, bearded stranger sipped thoughtfully at a beer, with his eyes closed, listening to Mozart. In an Agatha Christie book, Anastasia realized, there had always been at least one murder by chapter 4. So she wrote ominously, Mozart was dead. So that's the end of this chapter. Very simple. They're just getting ready to have Anastasia's friends, the old people, over. She's talking to her mom about it. Sam's annoying her. And then in the end, Steve calls and wants her to come meet his family on the Saturday. And Anastasia's obsessed with her family, with his family, because she thinks that everyone's amazing. Turns out that she won't be able to go, so she's kind of having a tantrum like a baby does. And that's the end of chapter